childhood, which I think we have covered quite a bit already. And maybe more importantly, why now? Omidyar Network just published a report called Big Ideas, Little Learners, but then you have a number of copies in the front if you want to read more, that looked at that question. And I just wanted to start the panel with a few data. Both on the demand side and on the supply side, we are seeing really a rise of interest in early childhood. So on the demand side, the US is simply in a big catch-up mode. We are spending as a nation 0.3% of GDP on early childhood. And that compares with any other developed nation spending 0.7% of GDP on early childhood. So we have a big catch-up to do. And the effort of Kris Perry in California is just one of 24 governors here in the US having early childhood on their agenda. So public funding is moving into early childhood in a way that's quite remarkable. Plus 62% over the past 5 years increase in early childhood funding. This is by far the fastest growing age group in education that is receiving public funding, much more so than K-12 that's largely flat, or higher education that's actually trending down from a public funding perspective. That's a message that I think is not told enough. Maybe for most of you in this room might know this, but again, like big increase, big trends in public funding increasing in early childhood. On the private side, we are also seeing parents investing more and more in their children. Employers are showing interest, with childcare being on the forefront of the agenda of employers as well. And then on the supply side, and that's really the panel here of those investors investing in those new innovations, in the supply of new ideas, we are also seeing a meaningful increase, plus 13% in the past 2 years of new companies started in early childhood. That's still a small portion of the overall edtech funding. That's estimated to be less than 3% of overall education funding is going into early childhood, 4% on the philanthropic side. So this is very, very small. We have a lot of room to go. And I'm very excited about introducing this panel and having them share their perspectives. We have 4 very different views assembled here. We have the view of an edtech investor with Wei, the view of a very traditional, one of the top leading venture capitalists with Charles, the view of a traditional foundation with the Gates Foundation, and we at Omidyar Network being an impact investor.
Isabel, we have breaking news. There is a 5th viewpoint.
There's a 5th viewpoint with Rob Hutter.
That was fun.
Early childhood is so exciting that we had to bring a 5th viewpoint to the stage.
So good to have you.
I won a lot.
So let me maybe start with the first question. I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves and highlight one of the investments that you have made in early childhood and why. And Wei, maybe I will ask you to start.
Sure, and excuse my voice, I'm sorry. My name is Wei Chu. I'm a general partner at Reach Capital. We are an early stage venture fund focused in education technology, spanning from pre-K through K-12 and higher ed, and now with a greater focus on future of work. I'd say we love our portfolio of early childhood companies. I want to point out one last year we did called Winnie. It's an online resource for parenting, specifically millennials, and these 2 founders who have such incredible product experience in the consumer tech world became mothers themselves and found themselves really quite challenged in terms of the asymmetric information out there around specifically childcare. So while still quite early, they are building a robust marketplace to focus on childcare exploration and discovery. And I think we'll come back to the discussion on on the big question on asymmetric information and how we can better support specifically parents in the space.
Great. I'm Charles Birnbaum. I'm a partner with Bessemer Venture Partners. And as Isabel mentioned, we're a pretty traditional venture capital firm. It's a large fund. We invest out of a nearly $2 billion vehicle. But we're early stage investors, and we tend to be thesis and sector focused. And I help lead our education investments. Within early childhood, it's been a tougher area for us to navigate for obvious reasons I think that we'll talk about in the panel, but has always been a personal passion of mine, and have been looking for ways to play the space for quite some time. And I think we identified that we've seen industry SaaS proliferate across our portfolio, and it's been one of our most successful threads that we've pulled on over the last 10 years. And early childhood was kind of untouched by SaaS for a very long time. And we identified kind of an early emerging leader in the category called Brightwheel, got to know the team over quite a few years. Similar background where to the Winnie team, where Dave Vasson, the CEO, had personal experience as a parent and came from a product background at Amazon and just wanted to facilitate something so he could know what was happening while his daughter was at preschool. So built a great product. It's used by many thousands of programs throughout the country, and is now going more into admissions and billing and learning and other things beyond just parent communication. So that's really one of our first major investments in the category.
Well, good afternoon. This is call and response. Let me try it again. Good afternoon. I'm Martina Davis. I am the Deputy Director for Early Learning with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we are traditional funders. We are working on early learning. This is a new endeavor for us, although the investments prior have been in the state of Washington. And we are now investing with 3 partners in quality early learning systems, building large quality early learning systems through an equity lens for low-income Black and brown children in particular, in 3 states, in Oregon, Tennessee, and Washington, with 3 wonderful partners, the Ounce of Prevention, the Alliance for Early Success, and the University of Washington. We believe that we can impact quality and learn how to improve quality learning systems through program practices, that's professional development, integrated data systems, et cetera. And we want to learn and help to build toolkits and innovations and methodologies that others can take up and we can scale beyond the states. We, in particular, are very interested in equity for low-income Black and brown children. I want to call that out again. And we want to know what needs to take place to improve quality where children are, regardless of the system. But we are focused particularly on pre-K, but pre-K is a mixed delivery system in some states, and that's where we are. So if you're traditional, I'm the other traditional side.
Isabel. Okay, well, I think we both could talk about Wonder School, so I'll let you speak about Wonder School, if that makes sense. Would be a company a lot of people in this room know. We're very excited to be a part of Kris's opportunity. I'll speak about a different company that might shed a lens to where it might be to use this traditional meme is a way that we can leverage some traditional patterns, but hopefully to newer and better ends. We're investors in a company called Higher Ground Education. And Higher Ground is essentially taking the Montessori movement and attempting to scale it. It's using physical schools, and we call it cloud-powered school model. The company was founded by a team that had done this to some degree in Southern California, built a cluster of about 15 to 20 schools, and wanted to do it at a much grander level. Today the company's opening 10 schools every 6 months. We have a pipeline of another over 100 schools, mostly United States, some overseas. And one of the principles is this idea that daycare itself can be augmented from daycare to learn care. And they begin at the age of 6 weeks is when they accept infants for the first time. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of different insights. When you're doing something that's essentially an entire solution, it wouldn't be one or two specific facets. I could illumine some of them, but the higher level point is by taking it on a whole solution basis, right, they can think very hard about what are the leverage points to drive, obviously, success, not only in building early cognitive skills, but also emotional learning. And they're attempting to do so and then iterate on those and grow very quickly. We've also been fortunate enough to attract support from the Walton Foundation, to help take the ideas that are being discovered in this scale at higher ground and then bring them also to the public sector and to versions of our schools that will be supported by foundations and taxpayer dollars. So higher ground education will be probably one of the bigger projects that we're working with at Learn right now, outside of Kris.
Yeah, and we'll hear about Wonder School later. So maybe let me highlight a company that is in attendance here in our portfolio that's doing remarkable work. Tinkergarten, working with families to play outdoors through a distributed network of leaders who are driving those classes. And in a very empowering way for those leaders who are being trained by the company. Fabulous model of no tech facing for children. So in contrast with the prior panel, an interesting take on early childhood innovation. And the founder, he's here in the room if you want to meet him. What is really interesting in our portfolio also at Media Network is just to tie back with some of my former remarks, although our portfolio is still very small in many ways and very early, 4 out of the portfolio companies that we have funded have now received over the past 12 months more than $20 million each. One is a nonprofit, still undisclosed, still private, will be announced over the next few weeks, and then 3 for-profit. Just signaling that there is a really interesting appetite from a lot of people here and in this room for investing in early childhood models. Martina, turning back to you on your focus on equity, can you speak about how you think about impact in your portfolio and in your activities?
So, the Gates Foundation, we're systems changers. I think many of us who fund want to see large impact system changes. And so while we are living out these quality program practices and systems, we want to see that if we learn, which we have the great ability to do at the foundation, which I love about working there, is if we can learn what works in these spaces. We could fail, we could figure it out, we could do something different. Whatever we learn in these systems, we want to make sure that they equate to child outcomes. I mean, why are we doing this work if we're not going to improve child outcomes? And so if we can have large systems change, if we can improve curricula, if we can have research-based curriculum that's developmentally appropriate, that is culturally sensitive, that's innovative in its practices with children, then we can have greater outcomes as we prepare kids for kindergarten or kindergarten for kids. And so impact for us is being able to move the needle in child outcomes. So that's how we would view impact through an equity lens.
Thank you. Wei, what is your take on this question about impact as an EdTech investor?
I think it's a great question. I'm going to point to 2 examples that I think are working very hard. I'll bring up actually Tinkergarten as well. I think there are very creative and important ways in which companies can partner with nonprofits and/or school districts to support the work they do. I mean, in the case of Tinkergarten, they're just starting school partnerships on what outside education and play-based education looks like, which has been removed from the classroom in so many settings. Another case, we have a company called KMU. It's an early childhood classroom communication tool with parents. They just partnered and created a licensing deal with HighScope, which is a nonprofit known for its research and curriculum around assessment. So what Cambu does now is power their observation-based assessment. So when we talk about impact, I mean, first and foremost, because we are so founder-led in terms of looking for missionaries, not mercenaries, understanding too that creative partnerships can absolutely be additive to the top line with nonprofits and really reflect an impact in terms of access and reach. So I'd also add, I think we've been putting a really strong lens around cultural responsiveness in the products being built. What I mean by that is I think in our diligence process more recently, as we look at products, specifically in early childhood and as they pertain maybe to more developmental behavioral therapy, do the founders truly understand the context or the diverse context in which these students, parents, and teachers are coming from, whether it's ethnic, gender, cultural. These are very important questions that are being built into the products we're all using that has really added to an impact lens on how we're supporting the products that are being built.
Rob?
On the impact side, I've seen
Impact, yeah.
Sure. Who wants to speak on that topic first? So, I mean, just very quickly on our side. So I think if you're not interested in impact, I mean, the prospect of investing in education would sort of seem sort of pointless, right? I mean, the idea was to foment transformative innovation in the sector, and hopefully the impact dividend is one of the most dramatic of the entire thesis. We also believe in the power of markets to go ahead and accomplish the harnessing of creativity to do so. At Learn, we track impact pretty granularly, although we don't make a decision at the upfront on the upstream basis on an impact criteria. We have, however, celebrated the fact that our companies have achieved a lot of impact. The prospect in this arena, as your opening remarks suggested, is that many other places in education have started to see some amount of significant disruption in a very positive outcome. We've not yet seen that here, and as the second and third and fourth gear of investment, entrepreneurs trying, some acquisitions occur, we might see one or two relatively large outcomes. We hope to achieve a sort of replenishing cycle where the impact that we can discuss in 5 years hence, will be very compelling. So
let me push back a little bit on this, because we could be in a world in a few years where we have funded all these edtech products, edtech solutions, but that do not make a difference in children's lives, or certainly do not address the learning gap and the opportunity gap that currently exists. Markita's point about equity. So, how do you look at this? How do you ensure that you are funding those that are not only in education, but that are also making a difference?
You want to speak in the early childhood context, ideally? I think.
More broadly,
I think the more broad, the more broad thesis might be. I'll use a non-early childhood as one example. So. Julia was just leaving, Julia Stigligz, who's now at GSV. She was at Coursera before. We're talking, and we're an investor in Coursera, been involved for now many years. So the prospect of putting these fantastic lectures available from Stanford and Princeton and NYU out to the world has resulted in the opportunity to get tens of millions of users in Africa, Latin America, and other places that would not have access to this intellectual property at all. And we do that because we take a very small amount of that base and we monetize them through essentially a certificate program or ultimately a degree, right? And so I believe in that case there was a huge dividend by enabling us to essentially unlock, from the citadel of higher education, insights that may make a difference in people's lives and the lives of their communities and their nations. In early childhood, our company, Higher Ground, that I mentioned, is pioneering a product. It is a private school product, but we also have corporate customers. There's a couple like SpaceX wants to involve LearnX. You might say, is that going to be a gap-widening technology or a gap-reducing technology, right? Because we're focusing on parents that can pay. Well, the takeaway will be the insights that we're building in to our operational software, which enables professionals to understand ways to interact with children, how to arrange, literally some of our software checks multiple times a day, how the room is arranged. We're now including RFID tags, and there's an IoT, Internet of Things type of it's essentially it pulses out when literally imagine all the Montessori toys, they need to be put back in a very specific way. When they follow a specific pattern, it creates a signal. Then you get a green light on your app, which you can pull on your phone, as long as there's like a Zigbee, which is a very inexpensive hub in the room. You get the idea. There's some ideas that perhaps may take some time to scale, but others that we think have tremendous applicability. As we invent them in this particular crucible, we think that there's an applicability that software, those devices, those approaches to be used by everyone and anyone. And our impact investors that have joined that company's cap table, they want to leverage those innovations. They want us to, in some cases, to open source them and make them available to anybody who wants them. Head Start operators have asked us about that, and other providers. So I hope that we'll see. I guess I'm very optimistic on that front. But I think it's a very, very important question if you're concerned about impact, which is, does this all go for something or for not?
And maybe just to chime in.
Charles,
obviously
I mean, I feel like this is a little bit of an unfair question for you as a venture, but
because I think about it all the time.
I would, obviously very interested in this question.
And I'm one of 15 partners at Bessemer. We're making investments across. One of my partners invested in Rocket Labs, which develops new rockets that go literally into outer space. I have partners that focus on cybersecurity and healthcare and the next consumer app that's going to take off. I feel fortunate that I get to at least look at education. I have to deliver for our LPs, but my education investments always benefit from the fact that they're making an impact. It's more fun to go to those board meetings. I think they recruit more easily. So we benefit from that, and I hope that those companies then give back. I mean, in the case of Brightwheel, just to use the company where I'm on the board, I see the tailwind in the market for universal pre-K. It makes me very happy to see that. We don't sell into most public institutions yet. It's a tough sales cycle. We'll have to think about that when we get there. But all those parents should be benefiting from knowing what's happening in the school for their 4-year-old someday, just like I do. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities here. And our portfolio companies like 2U and Instructure and Guild Education, they have elements of both. But when I'm first evaluating it, I have to think about what the return will be.
Thank you. When you started to allude to this earlier, but when you think about this new wave of investment in early childhood, where do you see the biggest risks and opportunities in your mind?
Wow, there's so many. I think broadly, the pipeline issue of both supporting early childhood educators from training, coaching, keeping the longevity of keeping early childhood educators is top of mind. Somewhat unrelated, the areas around behavioral, mental, and developmental health have been an area we've been diving deep and a bit careful on bordering that health tech space as you look at these companies from more of a curative to preventative spectrum. How can we better support in identifying, diagnosing, and supporting kids with learning differences, as we all know, caught at that earlier age will put us all out of business for all the other work we're doing upstream, which is a good problem to have. I think behavioral therapy specifically has been most relevant to us right now, just given how inaccessible behavioral therapy is and the rising state of cognitive differences such as ADHD, dyslexia. So how are there ways, whether it's tele-behavioral therapy, is it education to parents and better supporting around resources, and educator education on understanding learning differences. It's quite shocking I would love special educators to set the playbook on what general ed should look like around what it means to support different learners. So I mean, that was quite a bit, but I think those are the areas that are top of mind for us right now.
Charles?
Well, I think we're observing in early childhood, some of these quite disruptive models like a Wonder School or an Out School and some of these other models I find fascinating. I feel like there's a need for just the existing industry to kind of get up to speed though. And there's almost 1 million early childhood and preschool programs in the US, somewhere between 800 and 900,000 depending on the different stats you look at. And I think kind of bringing that whole industry forward is an opportunity too. to not only enable the experience for the kids, the parents, the interaction with teachers, following the guidelines that hopefully more state and local governments are going to pay attention to. I think you're seeing it in California, you're seeing it now in New York and some other markets. But I think there's still just kind of basic raw software opportunity in this area that doesn't exist anymore in other areas. So we're pretty excited just as a kind of an untouched vertical.
Mm-hmm. Risks and opportunities, huh? Early learning field. Well, I'll tell you the risk. We're traditionalists. You know, when you are thinking about how you can best respond to the early learning community, you will know that we will dress you down before you come through the door. We will think of all the reasons why we can't do what you are proposing, you want to do in our field. We don't trust you. We think that you're looking at children like widgets, and that you're not talking about child outcomes that benefit children and their families, that help them be productive adults. We want you to approach this work with some authenticity, that you care about these kids, and that you are not just trying to solve your bottom line. I'm just going to tell you, like they say in the South, I'm going to put the hay down where the ghosts can get it. If you can come there, and so there are risks, because we want research-based information to inform practice so kids can improve their learning. We think it's their right. And the opportunity is the same. It's wide open, you guys. And as funders, if you can come to the table with some innovative ideas that are backed by research, it's lovely to have, you know, apps and books and lollipops and unicorns. But if there's no data to support that any of this works, we need data. Our families want data. They have enough people coming into the communities, giving them things and saying this is the next best thing. We want innovative products and tools that can be used, that have been researched, that have some backing to it, that can improve outcomes for kids to prepare them for school. That's bottom line. And their parents also need things that can support their learning. Remember, many of these families are low-income families. So what happens when families have low literacy? What happens when families don't speak English? What happens when you're in rural communities where there's no access to technology in the same way? Don't take anything into consideration, and remember that it is a date. You have to date the community and come with lots of flowers and candy, but it better not be cheap, and it better mean something. So I think that whoever wants to invest in the early learning market, it is wide open, and the opportunity is huge.
And I think there's a really interesting point there, because Rob and I are actually involved in a company called BrightBytes, which is one of several players in the K-12 space that does data analytics and insights, and initially was basically turning research into actionable insights, right? I don't think that's possible yet here. I think we need to first have a basic technology layer that starts to collect data, people can interact, know what's even happening at these programs. So I think we're still in that phase in this market. To your point, it's kind of raw.
It is.
And even if I think you wanted to really do any of those things at scale, it's not quite ready, which I think is exciting as an investor.
It is. It's a good place to be.
But it's a really interesting point.
And then you also have to have these conversations with the people who are actually doing the work. You know, wait till you have, I met this lovely, and then I'll shut up. I met this lovely young lady named Amy, and Amy was talking about some SEL tools that she had, and she went into a Head Start program in Newark, and they looked at her like she was crazy. They were like, what is this? Don't you have a book? Don't you have something I can touch and feel and give my kids who don't have that? They're always looking at stuff. So she realized that she had to do what we do in research, mixed method, right? You have qualitative and quantitative data. And it worked, but she went into that community and she got herself handed, you know, her little, because Newark doesn't play, and the early, you know, Head Start was like, this is what we really need. These are the things that our classrooms are impacted with day-to-day activities, so. I guess you didn't expect that, but that's...
No, that's great. Rob, on this question about risks and opportunities in investing, like all this new activity in early childhood, how do you see this from your perspective?
Well, I think I probably agree with you. By the way, Isabel, who has gotten off the early childhood practice at NVIDIA and created such an incredible ecosystem, really have to thank you for putting a lot of this in map in Silicon Valley. So a round of applause for Isabel. Incredible. And for those that were at the meeting at eBay a couple months ago, and many people in this room were, incredible achievement. I think my view would be basically this. I absolutely agree with Marquita that in actually implementing some of these ideas, the risks are plenty. That you're not going to be successful, that you're potentially not going to be authentic, that you're not going to connect with the communities you want to serve. The question of whether we should be investing and innovating in it, though, I think there are no risks. Absolutely. I think we should be embracing it, and we should be doubling and tripling and 10xing the amount of energy in the space.
Great, so. Thank you.
Great.
So let me open it up. We have a few more minutes for questions from the audience. Yeah.
What's the thesis on AI for Sunil Gandhiri, Chief Strategy Officer from ASU Learning? I wanted to find out what is your thesis on AI in terms of early ed and in terms of driving out.
And I'll try and take this. I think that term is thrown around pretty loosely these days. Machine learning principles, neural nets, AI. I mean, I view vertical applications of those themes to be quite fascinating. I do some investing in financial services as well, and my most recent investment was a vertically focused AI company that's helping solve something that is not impact at all. It's insurance claim fraud. But I think similarly in this space, there is opportunity you have to have that data layer first, then you have to ingest it. Once you put that data in the right people's hands, you can perhaps early identify learning disabilities, put something in the hands of an educator in the room. I mean, there's huge potential here, but I think it's still a few steps away. People will talk about these themes. I get pitched several companies a week that are using, we're AI this, AI that. First, we just need kind of SaaS principles, I think, in this industry. And the data will get gathered, and then you can start to do some of those things.
Yeah, I think that totally agree with what Charles said. What we are seeing is clearly the use of big data penetrating all fields, including early childhood. And some of the use of big data is very beneficial for research and for specific applications. Now, from the investor perspective, it seems like as much as adaptive technology was very cool a few years ago, right now every single company that is pitching has AI or machine learning, which is not correct. Like adaptive was not really adaptive a few years ago. AI or machine learning is not really there. I suspect it will be. It's starting to penetrate a lot of our portfolio, and on what is very exciting is on the research side. Really bringing up the game on learning science, which could really transform a lot of what we do, and if we can really understand how human beings learn. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
So my name is Laura. I work in a Brazilian fund that invests in growth and early growth. I'm responsible for investments in education. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more on your perspective around why now. So just if we could hear a little bit about that. Why now?
Isabel, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the question was, why now?
So I think Isabel kind of kicked it off with a few of the stats. I mean, you have several tailwinds. People have woken up in several economies to how important early childhood education is. My mother actually has been running a nursery school for over 30 years in New York, and I've seen this gradual...
I knew I'd like you.
I've seen this gradual transition of it used to be something that was kind of cute to something that's critical and important, and now universal pre-K. We talked about some of these things. More women in the workforce. Just more focus on all of this, and then just basic software is enabling a lot of this stuff to be touched more cheaply. Even Brightwell has several competitors. It's not that hard to get one of these things up and running.
I'll add, Rob and Isabel, you can add, I think the premise around Wonder School is also the family component is completely changed now in terms of what that looks like, flexible work schedules, dual, if not triple job. I mean, there are several trends driving also just caretaking and daycare in general has completely shifted in what we traditionally have known in supporting.
And expectations. I mean, think about just what we expect from a financial services app now. And then when you put your kid in a daycare facility and you don't really know what's happening, there's just expectations are up across the board, I think. And you talk about information asymmetry. You just want to know when you're a parent what you're getting into.
Yeah, I think we also are at a convergence of different elements that make now a particularly interesting time. So you have the convergence of decades of science that are now really getting to the mainstream on neuroscience and the brain and the importance of it, especially 0 to 2 or 0 to 3, if not 0 to 5, of course. You have now a very strong economic argument that Nobel Prize recipient Jim Heckman has so eloquently made in greater than 13% ROI in investing. One of the greatest ROI, societal ROI is investing in early childhood. And you also have, again, that has led to massive interest from public. Parents are asking for better solutions for their kids. They are investing in better solutions, especially those that have the means to invest, which is a concern, frankly, for some of us that are very focused on this equity question, because you're seeing a widening spread between those parents who are investing in those high-quality solutions when they can afford them, and those that may even be left further behind if they are not, if they are not able to access those publicly funded solutions or more affordable solutions.
I think beyond the screen is a great deal of interest all over the venture landscape. And if you want to look at from the galactic level, I mean, the thesis of SoftBank and players on that basis is, let's do Katerra, $1 billion funding to go disrupt the construction industry. Let's look at building astroponic-like solutions to reinvent how we can do cash crops. I mean, early childhood by definition is beyond the screen, right? And that's what's really exciting. This is a frontier space that I think has, for a whole bunch of reasons, gotten to be an area where, as Charles said earlier, this is blue ocean, right? It's not red ocean, really, it's blue, and it's enormously exciting. I've used the word excitement many times in this conversation. And that type of enthusiasm and to some degree, investor seeking novelty, if you want to be very cynical about it, leads to an opportunity to say, this space is now really coming into focus, and will be so, I think, now for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
It's just the right thing to do.
There you go. That's the right answer. Yes.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for our panelists for this great discussion. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great meeting you.